Welcome back to Derek's Discussions. We're here to talk about a new discussion about my granduncle, Arthur Lamb, who's an inventor of a quick-release Paton holster. Now, I'm here with my cousin, Ryan Lamb, and my other relative, Jim McCowell. How are you doing today, too?
We're doing good so far.
Good.
Doing great.
Good, good. Now, tell me the story, Jim McCowell, about the quick-release Paton.
All right. My Uncle Arthur, he's been a Boston police officer for quite a few years. And through his time being there, he got to see what some arrests would go pretty wrong. Back from the civil rights time in the early 60s, the means of apprehending the more aggressive protesters would end up in where police would take the baton and walk over to the protesters, and to break them up would swing at them, hitting them in the head, causing a lot of trauma. And he made this holster to prevent that problem, where it had a double snap to prevent it from being taken away, and it was a quick release, so that in the process of using it, he could get to it right away, deploy the weapon, and then step back, and it would be a one-strike deal without causing serious trauma to the assailant. At the same time back then, the news channels would put a focus on the police officer hitting the assailants, or in this case, the protesters over the head, causing a lot of problems. And with that much bleeding, it looked bad for the police. And it was also pretty destructive to be hit on the head with a nightstick. But doing this way, you hit a knee, the person drops to the ground, and the altercation is over right there. No problem. The person's injuries are fairly superficial. It's a bruised knee, but there's no concussion, there's no fractured skull. It's a survivable impact that can be healed. And I brought a piece of dowel, 24 inches, the size of the baton back then, and if possible, I'd like to show how this was implemented.
Please demonstrate.
All right. Could you
Sure.
step up? Anyway, in the normal case, police officer would be standing in line holding off the crowds. Usually what happened in the early 60s is the police would either treat this like a bayonet and either ram into the soft underbelly, and then what would happen is there would chance of ruptures of internal organs. The other thing they were doing, which is what I already spoke about, was to swing overhead, hitting somebody in the head, causing a lot of bleeding. It could cause a fractured skull, at least a concussion, and we know now through sports that that kind of damage one day can affect somebody down the way. And my uncle didn't want that. You can't have people bleeding all over the place. It don't look good. It's bad all around. Everybody loses. So what would happen in this instance is, so there's a standoff between me and the assailant. And the holster is set up on the side with the stick diagonally set. There's a snap on the top side that the thumb is used to open it up. And the bottom snap is pulled up to release the baton. The way it goes is, the police officer steps back, the assailant moves forward feeling he's intimidating the police officer, and that's when that snap comes up, this one goes down. As soon as that goes down, the baton is released. And he hits him in the knee, and the assailant goes down. Now it's an easy arrest. You don't have to follow up and club the guy. Once he's down, the police can arrest him, they can handcuff him, or bring him to an ambulance for any medical treatment they need. And this is the part of being not just a police officer, a peace officer, where you do the least amount of damage to get the desired effect of bringing peace to the community, where you're not clubbing everybody, and at the same time, you get the people to settle down and not continue with their bad behavior. So he took it to heart. He's a police officer and a peace officer. And he protected a lot of people through all of those years. Because when they did this, they didn't have to go club people on the head. As a matter of fact, even today with tasers, there's still problems with tasers. If somebody has a pacemaker and you're sending electrical current to a person, it has been known to affect people with pacemakers. And any other heart issues, whether the person is a drug addict and their heart is questionable. A strike on the knee doesn't even affect the heart. So even by today's standards with the newer technology, this is still safer. Because again, it affects a non-lethal area. Doesn't affect the heart, don't affect the brain. You take out the guy's legs, he can't run away, he can't charge at you, and that becomes a safety thing for the cop and for the assailant. It's a very quick, simple, and non-lethal way of controlling a bad situation. And I think it is pretty good that he did that back then. And the next problem that came, that sounds like a nice story that he did all that good work, protecting everybody on both sides of the law at that point. But the sad part of it all is that when he did make this invention, he did that as a surprise to myself and my family. This is back in '68. And he showed up at our house and he told us he had something to show us. He used to come by letting us know how things went when he was teaching at the police academy. And it wasn't just here in Massachusetts, it was across the country. And he even went and taught the police in China and across over in Europe too. They liked the holster, they liked the length of the baton, they liked the way it was deployed, everything about it. So he wanted to tell us about it, that this is what he did. And he broke out the schematics, the blueprints if you want. He showed us, we were very impressed with it. And then he ended up going into a little brown paper bag. And what did he do? He pulls out the prototype of the holster. The leather, the snaps all set up. It wasn't like a cardboard facsimile, it was the real thing. And he demonstrated it to us. And after that, which we were fully impressed with, then he pulls out the booklet. And he shows us that. And he's opening up the pages and showing us. And the illustrations were also by another uncle, his brother John Lamb, who was an art teacher for Brookline High. So everything was kept in the family. And again, this was a complete package. The nightstick, the holster, and we had the instruction manual on how to deploy the weapon. And I almost don't like to use the term weapon because you start thinking in violent terms. It was actually a suppressant for assailants, you know. It quieted them down. It wasn't something that was meant to be destructive. And anyway, he's showing this, and it was great to see. And he says, look, he said, I have to go. I'm going to meet up with somebody from Smith & Wesson. One of their representatives wants to look at it and see if he thinks it's a viable product, that they can market it, or they'll produce it themselves, manufacture it. And my uncle went off to see this guy and negotiate a contract for sales. 3 months later, he comes back to our house for a visit, and he asks us, do we remember the day that he showed us his invention and the book that went with it? And we said, yeah, about 3 months ago. And he says, well, he says, can you give me a precise date? And it's like, well, it's 3 months ago, it's hard to remember. And we asked him why. And he says, well, he says, they had me leave my prototype and the schematics with them so they could evaluate its viability on the market. And while they had it, they went to their patent lawyers and they registered my invention under their name, Smith & Wesson. They stole his patent. And this was back in 68 to 70, because in 68 he was actually showing us this, and I think it was the 1970 Smith & Wesson actually put it out. And there's been modifications of it, and it's been pretty much still in its normal form up to about a year ago, and then they moved on to a different style, which I think is inferior to what he had, because what he had before with the snaps actually allowed to use the police method of the actual swinging of the baton and taking out the knee in that moment. The holster was integral to the way that was used. And the booklet could not have been made unless you knew what you were making it for. So the author of the book, by that very nature, had to be the inventor of the holster. They're together. It's like the head and the heart. The brain can't function without the heart, nor the heart without the brain. And the same thing is, the book could not stand by itself and say, he made this idea up, Smith & Wesson made the holster. Wouldn't work that way. You can't have an idea without a way to actually perform the idea. And the holster was just that. The holster had to be made to be the design that matched the book. My uncle did all of it. He got money for the copyrights on the book. He made money on that. He did not make one dime off his invention in all of these years. And it had to be worth tens of millions of dollars. I mean, for all the generations of police, and how many police, this was something, like I said, it was not simply in Massachusetts.
Not just nationwide, worldwide.
Right, it is worldwide. And he lost all that money due to Smith & Wesson.
Correct.
So he didn't see a dime of it, his kids didn't see a dime of it, and his wife didn't see a dime of it. So it was a big cheat all around. But, you know, it's business, I'm sorry to say. He lost out. He did everything right. He tried to benefit society with that. And he did. He did take care of society. Even though Smith & Wesson made money off it, it's my uncle's invention who protected a lot of people on both sides of the law. So I got to tip my hat to him for that. He did a good job as a police officer, and I think he's a credit to the force. You know, I know there's a home movie made out by him involving some members of the family, and that's something that maybe we can discuss later. But that'll be a part two if we need it to be that way. But that's pretty much the story of it. And I hope everybody enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and comment on the video.